In this episode, we dive into setting up operations, look inside a caboose that had issues, break down union yard operations, talk speed match or back EMF.
What the hell does that mean?
We check out something unheard of.
That means whatever the hell you want it to mean.
And Cullen answers the viewer's question of the week.
So kick back, roll an axle, and maybe you'll accidentally learn something on this episode of the GN 1970.
70s.
All right, we're out at the GN in 1970 getting ready for the next set of operations. I'm just going to give you a real brief look at what goes into starting up and setting the operating session itself. So we're going to pop over to the computer, take a look at the actual trains that are going to be ran because we've gone through half of the roster and we'll go through the second half to be able to complete the next operating session. So let's take a look. A little behind the scenes of the GN in 1970 operations using JMRI, and no, I'm not going to dive into all
The settings, locations, cars, locomotive, routes, and trains.
because that's diving into the nitty-gritty.
Nitty-gritty.
I've already done that. I've gone over it in the past, but I want to look at now is how we set up the next operating session. So we already had one. I will open up the trains. Here I am looking at it saying,
How do I want to control the next session?
And do I want to bombard the yard, guys?
Or do I want to make it a little bit easier on them?
depends on your operators you have coming in, but in this application, I'm going to show you how you can manipulate that. And it's really based on how you build your trains or when you build them. Just as an example, all the ones that are highlighted in black are trains we've ran in the past. If it's highlighted in red, the red just means that there's a build fail. I know the build fail with this potash train. It's because there's not enough staging in the east end. And the way I'm dealing with that is letting the operator, or the dispatcher rather, decide where he wants to stick that train on the system, wherever, and then he has to kind of deal with it, but get it out of the way at his own discretion. So moving on, we've already technically ran the local. The local was already ran by Dave, and since that was ran, it would be highlighted in black normally, but the one thing I like about JMRI, at any time, I can build a local. If somebody comes over to visit, I don't have to worry about the system. It's like,
Oh, it's already staged for running operations.
that's not true. You can run it anytime, run the trains, it moves cars around, it does help flush stuff through the system, but you kind of want to be selective at times when picking what train you want to build to help move stuff in or out of an area. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me just show you. So if I reset that particular train, I'm going to build for the next session.
I go through and I just click build on all these trains that we want to run.
This block of trains is ready. I always go up to the east trim as well as the north trim for Lyndale, and I build both of these. I build a Union trim, and I build a Wilmer trim. If I want the Lyndale guy working the west job, I can build this, but I leave that for the M&S switching, which is down here. The M&S transfer, they'll do the work on those west industries. That takes a little bit of work off of the Lyndale guy. But now, as I said before,
Or how do I control what is being done or handled by a yard guy?
well, right now, Lyndale guy has 6 cars to deal with in the east location. Union and Wilmer, those guys both already have theirs populated. And then, of course, the rest of the trains are built. If I want to give this guy more work, I simply do this. I can reset so these trains are not populated. I will reset this group, and I will build these first. So now look at 10 cars, 10 cars, 12 cars, 23 cars. Holy smokes, he's got some work to do. Well, it is the heavy local. The reason these numbers have gone up is because you're giving more work to these trains first. JMRI looks at the system and says, where can I put cars? If you build these first, they will build more. Now I go down and I build these. What this also does is it actually alleviates the amount of building that's happening to guys in these areas. Now notice there is a build fail here, and I know that's because Lyndale itself has too much traffic coming in and out of it, and the system just says,
Hey, stop. You're sending too much crap in here.
I have to poop.
we're not going to build that train. I can end up just going up here and I can reset these. I can hit the build here, and now I have built the M&S transfer. Go back up, and I can build these, and we're back in 5, 7 cars. That's not too bad. 12 isn't too bad. 12 is probably better than 20, but it's also better than just having 6 or whatever our original number was. That is how you control where cars are going on the system, who gets the more work. You want to kind of get it balanced. So if I ever build this thing out and I notice that there's a ton of traffic up here, I'll then unbuild everything and then just build up the bottom stuff first to take the load off of the guy having to do his trim work. So the trim jobs are just local jobs that happen on the railroad, and you can kind of use them to alleviate or maximize the amount of work that is happening within a yard. So hopefully that helps you get a look at behind the scenes of the GN 1970 with the operations, how we build it. The system now is sitting here ready, waiting. We just got to get the operators out here to run the railroad.
It's It's quiz time.
The only switchers acquired after April of 1967 when Big Sky Blue was adopted and before the BN merger of 1970 were 10 EMD SW1500s. 6 of the 10 new switchers are ready for delivery near LaGrange, Illinois on October 1st, 1967. Do you know how many locomotives wore the Big Sky Blue paint? Was it A, 239, B, 212, C, 183, or D, 56? We'll find out later in this episode.
All right, today we're taking a look at a detailed Athearn Genesis caboose that has sound and lights. But the sound didn't work, the lights did.
We're gonna have a problem here.
Have an issue if you're having a sound caboose. I originally popped off the cupola, and there's just 4 little tabs that hold it on. I just popped these 2 supports free of the stack, so it didn't lift that off as well, but squeezed the cupola and lifted it off to start the exploration process. Looked down in there and thought, well, I couldn't see anything when it was just like this. I was kind of looking down at a top of a circuit board and tried to kind of figure out how you can get the actual chassis up. It's not too bad. There's 4 little tabs, one here, here, and then on the other side you can see where they actually touch to the shell itself, and it just lifts right off. So I gained access. Once I had access, I started looking around trying to figure out how to get the circuit board popped free. Once I had done that, I was able to then diagnose and find out that there was a wire to the speaker that needs to be resoldered. It had just popped free in shipping. So not an ideal thing to deal with, but being in modeling as long as we have, I've done this long enough, I'm not intimidated by these super detailed cabooses, but for any of you that are, this does pop free fairly easy. If you want to maybe add a crew member or paint the interior or do something additional to a caboose like this, this is your opportunity, and this is kind of how you can go about doing it, by popping it free, disassembling it, and addressing your modeling needs. So we're going to take a look at this in a little bit more detail, but first I am going to solder that lead onto the speaker. All right, so I did end up getting the lead soldered onto the speaker. I decided I'm removing this harness that was holding the motherboard up because it was holding it up right in the center of all the windows. And I'm taking a twisty tie. So we've got just a basic black twist tie, and I've stripped the center of it, as you can see, that's so it can fit around that post down below right there. And I've already done the one side right here, and I'm bringing these twisty ties up to be able to run through the motherboard, and then I'm going to bend them over. So it's basically just going to hold it to the ceiling. And I figured when I look through there, if you look through the top of the cupola, you're barely going to see what would be the top of the motherboard anyway. And you could look down there and see it as it was when it was mounted to the top of this thing. So I'm just modifying this to hold the motherboard to the roof of the caboose.
Getting to know the GN in 1970. Jobs for Ops. Union Yard.
Just taking an overview of Union Yard to take a look. These 4 tracks on the back, they're considered the classification tracks. And then the next 4 tracks over are considered the arrival departure. So it would be tracks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those are the 8 tracks in Union. If another bit of power is needed, triple nickels here, the Great Northern SD unit will assist in being able to switch. So the Yardmaster has the choice of that locomotive, or they can take the SW1500. The caboose track is for any arrival departures that either need to have a caboose dropped off at. And then obviously that caboose track is the same thing. The engine facility itself can have a hostler that can work out of the corner, and that particular job is just handling the power that's in there. So having somebody that's savvy with a super throttle, a Digitrax controller, to be able to swap out power, because we do have trains that come in that may need power taken off if it's CBQ power and GN power gets put on. As far as industries, Union trim gets ran. This is the Union elevator. It handles a number of cars, but it is handled by the Union trim that handles Union. And then there's the Fugta elevator, Fugta. And then we swing around, and the remaining work on the east end here,
Bertram Cement.
as well as Pillsbury and Electric Steel. Those 3 industries get handled just by the Union trim, as well as the very far west end of Union. There are 2 industries there that get handled by the Union crew. So we swing over, and these are the other 2 industries that we were referring to. This is considered Minneapolis Junction. There's a team track, and then also the warm chemical. So you have a tank or a box that go in there, and those are handled on the Union trim job. All right, so that's Union Yard. It's a pretty good job to have. It is one of the most complicated, so if you haven't ran a complicated job before, probably not the first one you want to start with. Those that have ran it in the past that enjoy a challenge, they've definitely done well with it. So if you are looking for a challenge and you are an experienced operator, this might be a great job for you. Have you been stressing about that answer to this week's quiz question? No? Well, for those that have, the answer was A, 239. There were 183 locos repainted,
That's what I was thinking. That's why I guessed C.
where 56 locos were delivered in the new Big Sky Blue.
Oh, I was just thinking of delivered. Oh, that's why I guess D.
Well, if all of those that guessed C and D would just get together, add them both up and you will get A, 239.
That's all for this week's quiz question. Hope you enjoyed.
So what I've done is I've used the twisty ties to be able to hold back wiring to kind of help try to alleviate the view through the caboose itself. I don't want any wires dangling. So I've just kind of helped hold them to the side. It's holding it to the top of the caboose. You do see the capacitors slightly right there in that window, but I'm gonna have to move on with that because there's no way I can hide those capacitors that are hanging down. So that's what I've done. You can see the lights that are on the motherboard. There are 3 interior lights, so when this thing does get illuminated, it'll just show a bunch of wires and chaos going on inside since there's no interior. But you guys get the gist of what's happening, and hopefully this helps anybody that might be struggling with their caboose or looking to upgrade it.
So we take a look at a couple of locomotives that had an issue that I've shown in the past, and it's that pulsating. We've had a few guys that mentioned the back EMF. Take a look at the binding of the gears. Maybe look at some of the other programming, whether it's speed matching, to make sure the locomotives sync together. There are a lot of different questions that might be asked.
Who put you up to this?
A few of the guys said, check the speed matching. Well, that's obviously that you can see one is a little faster than the other.
What the hell does that mean?
Means that one goes a little bit faster than the other, so what I'm going to do is adjust the speed ratio on one of the units. So what I did is went into JMRI and read the decoder to see the speed table, and that actually upped the reverse trim. And I did this on both locomotives to hopefully balance it out.
Wait a minute, I think you've got it backwards.
Well, the only thing backwards is the one locomotive in comparison to the forward-running locomotive, and this is just because the backward-running locomotive was a little bit slower than the forward-running, and that was the case for both directions. So the other locomotive had to have its reverse trim adjusted as well. So I did couple them back together, and here we are, still rowing the boat.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream.
As it doesn't appear we eradicated the issue, I end up moving on to the back EMF by adjusting CVs 209 and 210 per the Tsunami manual. Now 209's default value is 25, I upped it to 40, and 210, I did the same thing, went from 20 up to 40. Ended up testing out the locomotives and see how they ran independently. Seems like they ran okay. So here we are coupled after making the adjustment to the back EMF, and it seems a lot smoother. So we're content with the results thus far. We'll run these back up to the top of the hill and bring the train back to Wilmer. Now that the train has traversed back up to Wilmer, we'll back it into staging to have it prepared for the next session. And since it's parked and ready to go, let's take a look at the before and after and how this all turned out. As this surging or rowing effect was not ideal, a big thanks to you guys that chimed in with the suggestions of changing the speed matching as well as the back EMF. These are the end results, which are much smoother. I know we didn't dive into tearing apart the drivetrain, but if we can avoid it, we will.
You got that right.
Modeler highlights with Paul Becker, sound in an MK5000C. School's out.
Here's something I don't cover very often, and that's modern power. Well, this isn't really that modern, seeing that it was circa 1995. These are MK5000Cs. It's an Overland model that Paul just recently put in LEDs and sound. The sound is spectacular. I'm going to let you kick back and give it a listen. What's inside this beast but a decoder buddy version 5 with the Tsunami 2 decoder. It has a scale sound system speaker which is pushing out all that sound.
The speaker itself is 20 millimeters high, 18 millimeters wide, and 45 millimeters in length.
Now that is a beast.
As we don't see Morrison Knudsen power that often, Paul has 3 of these, so he's got 2 more to do. They sound pretty good. Good luck on these, Paul, and thanks for sharing.
You done shoot about as good as you model.
Here's Colin answering the viewers' questions of the week. Do I ride passenger trains? Well, the last one I rode was in 2004. That was the Empire Builder. And as far as ballast on the GN in 1970, well, I place it one piece of ballast at a time. This project ought to be complete around 3034. That's just how fast railroads work. Colin's out.
Hopefully you enjoyed the content of this episode. If you want to see more, you can check out more episodes of the GN in 1970, as well as Sue the Milwaukee Road. You can see a tour of the GN in 1970 and even a few other layout tours. Nonetheless, check out the content and hopefully you enjoy that as well as future episodes. Thanks for watching.